So we know that Zeus is the undisputed king of the gods, and in all of his eons of rule, there has not been a god, monster, titan, or giant to usurp him from his place atop the golden throne of Olympus. Hera and a small cohort of rebel gods launched a semi-successful coup that didn't last long, and no matter what, Zeus seems to always find his way back into the role of leadership. But he had to take the throne from someone. Fans of the series know the story of how Kronos consumed his children, and how his wife Rhea hid Zeus away in a cave until he was old enough to return and overthrow his father. But what's less widely known is everything that happened outside of this. The years afterwards, when the gods and the titans are actually at war, are much less thoroughly explored. But luckily, we found the predominant account of these events. So today we want to talk about the war between the gods and the titans, how Zeus trained, and talk about the days leading up to Kronos' inevitable demise. Since this channel specifically talks about the canonical events of the Percy Jackson books, our primary source will be the Greek Gods companion novel, though this book is narrated by Percy himself, so it should be taken with a grain of salt. For any information that isn't spelled out in the series, we'll turn to real-world mythology. What many may not know is that it was actually Gaia who whispered in Rhea's ear before Zeus was born, and Gaia told her to go down to Crete where nymphs would be waiting to help her. By the time Zeus was born, Kronos had already consumed 5 of Zeus's siblings, so Rhea was desperate to find a solution. So when she was ready, she went down to Crete and Zeus was born. When she got there, the nymphs of the island had also heard the voice of Gaia and knew what to do. They set her up in a cave that ran past the mouth of a river and backed up against a sprawling forest, so that Zeus would have plenty of resources growing up. By this point, Gaia is already asleep, but it's important to note that she fell deeper and deeper into her slumber with each passing year until she began to stir during the events of Heroes of Olympus. Gaia's state here is comparable to what we see in the Heroes of Olympus books, where she can talk and know what's going on, but she's not fully awake. So she opened up the earth and presented Rhea with a stone in the shape of an oval. According to the Greek Gods novel, it was the perfect size and weight matched to Zeus, and so Rhea understood what she had to do. She left Zeus with the nymphs on Crete and returned to Mount Orthus, and the nymphs cared for the infant in her stead. They fed him honey from the nearby bees and milk from the immortal goat Amalthea, which, fun fact, is the same goat that led Talia out of Los Angeles after she ran away and across the country to Luke. Amalthea and the nymphs, however, were not alone. Gaia harvested the blood of Uranus to create 3 Chorides, 3 large humanoids who were tasked with not just caring for Zeus, but they were loud enough to camouflage any sound that he might make when he cried, so Kronos didn't hear. Rhea returned with the stone, but she knew that she couldn't allow Kronos to take a close look at the rock that she had swaddled in baby Zeus's clothing, and so she threw a fit and fought Kronos. She thrashed and screamed about how horrible he was, causing him to wrestle the boulder away and swallow it quickly without looking at it. But Rhea kept on with her show. She cried and yelled and stormed off, tricking Kronos into believing that he had just swallowed his 6th child. Throughout Zeus's childhood, he trained with the Chorides and the nymphs, growing more and more powerful by the day while he bided his time. His mother would sneak off to visit him regularly, and on one fateful day when he was grown, she presented him with the opportunity to finally face Kronos. She reported that Kronos was in need of a cupbearer, so Zeus molded his shape to more closely resemble a titan, more primitive, taller, and less dense with raw power. He made his way to the palace on Mount Orthus and dazzled Kronos and the titans with his showmanship, eventually landing a job as Kronos' cupbearer. As he rose through the ranks, he stoked Kronos' competitive nature by hosting drinking competitions, where titans would line up and down an entire chalice of nectar. Whoever downed the nectar the fastest was the winner. It wasn't much, but Kronos' amusement with humanity had faded, and he was growing wearier and wearier, so he needed something to reinvigorate his violent nature. It wasn't long before Zeus rigged the competition by serving the rest of the titans a sedative, but for Kronos, he had prepared a special blend. According to Chiron and the Lightning Thief, it was a mixture of mustard and wine, but the Greek Gods novel points out that wine hadn't been invented yet, so exactly what Zeus served that day is still unknown. After a dinner celebration, the titans were beginning to feel weary and tired, and Zeus seized his chance to boast about Kronos' drinking ability. He appealed to Kronos' ego and coaxed him into partaking in a drinking competition, which is when the story as we know it takes place. Kronos downed the entire chalice before realizing the side effects, and he regurgitated the other 5 gods, but the story is not done here. This is where Chiron ends his tale, but the years that followed showed the gods' rise to power and the war as it played out, so let's dive into the years beyond. Now the 6 gods had narrowly escaped the clutches of Mount Orthus and needed a plan of attack, because even though they were gods, 5 of them had never been trained in combat, and they all had to forge their own identities and mount a resistance. At last, the war had begun. When they all returned to Mount Ida, they were met by Rhea, who rejoiced that her children were now free. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Poseidon, and Hades had now joined Zeus, but they needed weapons. Luckily, however, Rhea knew exactly where they could arm themselves, and she told them stories of the old days, back when the Titans had usurped control of the cosmos from Uranus. When Kronos rose to power, one of the first things he did was banish the 100-handed ones and the Elder Cyclopes to the depths of Tartarus, where they were being watched over by Campy, the very same Campy from Battle of the Labyrinth. Hades led the team down into the underworld, where he showed an uncanny comfort for the catacombs beneath the surface. and eventually they found their way all the way down to the pits of Tartarus where the prisoners were kept. With her fiery whip, she kept the Cyclopes and the 100-handed ones in check with an iron fist, but the gods were crafty. They noticed Campy never allowed them to finish a project, since weapons could be dangerous, so as soon as the Cyclopes got close to finishing something, she would confiscate it and throw it aside. So the gods made their way around the yard, since even Campy couldn't be in two places at once. So they tracked her around and convinced Brontes to make them pieces of weapons and hand them over to the gods before Campy got her hands on them. Word got around, and several conspirators created pieces of weapons that looked harmless on their own. But Brontes was able to assemble them while Campy was patrolling the other side of the prison yard and throw them over to the gods. This is where the gods got their iconic armaments, from Zeus' Master Bolt to Poseidon's Trident to Hades' Helm of Darkness. According to the Greek gods novel, the goddesses didn't get weapons because Campy noticed them, but this is a part where Percy speculates, so we don't actually know whether or not it's true. But whatever the case, it was only the three brothers who got iconic weapons. The Titan War itself took another 10 years, since neither gods nor Titans could die. But as the war continued, more and more Titans defected to the side of the gods, and the winds began to change. Helios and Selene remained neutral, as did Prometheus, and Oceanus receded to the depths of the ocean, leaving Kronos with just a small handful of allies. One by one, the Titans turned on Kronos, but without any way to permanently defeat them, there wasn't anything the gods could do, so the war continued. Islands were demolished, mountains fell, and the countryside was ignited in flame, but the Titans were slowly losing steam. Eventually, Zeus understood what must be done. He told his siblings they were going to storm Mount Orthus. They knew that a full frontal assault could not be done. The mountain was too steep, and Atlas was too powerful with the home field advantage. It's one thing to defend a mountain from climbing invaders, but it's another beast entirely to be the one marching up the side and still hoping to win. So charging indirectly was out of the question. Zeus, however, was the Lord of the Sky, and now he had the Master Bolt by his side. He took Poseidon and the 100-handed ones to the next mountain over, a barren peak known as Mount Olympus. Poseidon brewed a storm to engulf Mount Orthus, and the 100-handed ones launched volleys of boulders at the palace, all while Zeus himself led the strike. With the Master Bolt by his side, Zeus absolutely eviscerated the palace of Mount Orthus, while Hades sent waves of terror across the valley to cause panic and disorientation among the Titan ranks. The lightning storm Zeus is said to have brewed that day was utterly apocalyptic, a show of strength so violent and so ferocious that is yet to be matched since. Until now, Mount Orthus was the tallest mountain in all of Greece, but when Zeus was done with it, he had not only annihilated the palace on the peak, but he had crushed the mountain itself down to half its original height. This frontal assault rained devastation that completely crushed the Titans under Zeus's heel, and the dissenters were caught in Poseidon's earthquakes that consumed the land below. When Zeus and the gods marched across the ruins of Mount Orthus, there was nothing left to oppose them. Zeus decided that Koios, Krios, Iaptis, and Hyperion were to be banished to Tartarus for their treachery, but Atlas simply laughed at Zeus's naivete. He mused that these four had inherited the pillars of the sky from their father, as they were the Titans of the north, south, east, and west respectively, so banishing them to Tartarus would cause the sky itself to fall and the world to end. Zeus, however, entertained by Atlas's smug retort, got an idea, and that's how Atlas was burdened to hold the weight of the sky by himself. Kronos, however, received the worst of any Titans. The children dragged their father out from the rubble, and just as Kronos had done with his own father, they took his scythe and hacked him to pieces. His remains were scattered across Tartarus, though his consciousness remained, thin as it was. It took him eons to regain a consciousness and later a voice, and in the months leading up to the events of the Lightning Thief, he was whispering in the ears of demigods who were dissatisfied with the way the gods had ruled their age of the cosmos. We are often told about the First Titan War, and we hear references to the day Kronos regurgitated his children, but as far as we could find, no mention in the mainline series was given to the absolute calamity that befell Mount Orthus. We cannot find any point where this particular story was told, and certainly not in this much detail. But that's how Zeus rose to power and how he absolutely annihilated Mount Orthus. Did you know this part of the story, and would you like to see a display of power on that magnitude again at some point in the series? As always, we love this series, we love talking about the series, and we would love to have you join in the conversation below. Stay safe, demigods, and we'll see you in the next one.